into ETA, the external, the temperatures, and its atmospheres of change. Measure scales, communication lines of ground, communication high lines of service. Gravitational locks, gravitational pulls, and compressors over lines, sending lines to all communication systems and high-speed travels. Humanity's got to get in flux line direct locations, how to get in position of 3 lines of 4, sending lines of 7 lines of sequence, windows and frame, travel point lines of graph, and calculation lines and settings, all through body framing. Directing lines into also lines of FFA, line EFTA, line positional levels, placements over screen, flux over lines, directing lines of grounds. Now they have center core system like units and high centers. All humanities into 72 computer clocking, connection sending high lines of travel, which is self mode. Directing lines in activators is 144, which is computer mode, and position locations operating units are in 01 tractions, which is digital mode. Now, how to set up a clocking center is basically understanding how to get in the flux over line. The body has to come into its networks. Process lines, box frame, correlation setting, interactions, right? Rectangle, split lines of 1, process lines of 2 over 3. Okay, center grounds have 1 center, 2 travels, and 3 set position. Okay, crossing angles puts position lines of high center location system to dimensional door right here in signal. Center grounds have 1, 2, and 4, and 3 lines of measure and scale. Okay, process indicates system, center core settings of Jupiter, Pluto, Neptune, Saturn, and Mercury in set traction. Okay. Directing lines of 1, directing lines of 2, Earth position lines of settings, set position 1, 2, 3, triangulation molecule design lines 3 over 6, set position 9, 12 lines, 24 lines, sets 2 million of door screens, and flux over screen. All right, change division lines of all calculation screen adaptations of flux over setting. High signals, inside rotation, outside tractions, inside calculations. All right. Then we go through the inline, outline, rotation, service, and travel. Okay. Ground lines of service, location, setting, a box frame. Okay. Platforms 1, E factors over screen. It set tractions into 0. Process lines of 12 angles, and pi set of correlation. Center communication high grounds, high lines of service, over metrics, over scale, over meters. Okay, DX of platform. Process lines indications cross angles and 3 lines in scale. And that communicates in setting. Travels point lines of graph into solar generations. High temperature readings and pyramid activation screen. Okay. Platforms over skyline, sky grid, sky panel, sky metric meter, and scale. Okay. High screens, high direct signal location system, all through conceptual system, all through travel. Okay, center box, center travel, center communication setting is center operation lines of sequence. Okay, face recognition. See the face? Set setting here, face communications, all set rotational lines of set calculations. Okay, now, wall sequence lines of panels, the communication of the Earth has to come into its plasma H2O, coming into electrical lights lines of communication setting. Process lines of center core center, plasma wall, plasma 2, plasma 4, plasma 6. Okay. Center core system of flux over line, umbrella over sequence, flux over screen, umbrella over ether line connections, core lines of track centers, mass calculation setting, and Fibonacci sequence lines of panel. Open vibration line, signal case inset position. Okay. Tracking centers into high correlation system and travel. Okay. Inside rotation lines in position over line 6 over 9. High signal signs of travels and direct lines and link location system. Processing communication setting and travel, directing communication of the Earth to a dimensional solar sail. Solar sail divisions, divert system lines of travels in set core set calculation. The operation line, split lines of anomaly, 3 lines of sail location setting. So it's like an egg splitting in center. Processing communication high tractions. Okay, high signals, liquid formations of core, liquid formation lines and levels, liquid formation lines of travels in H2O. H2O rotates the line center circuits location system, all through tractions, 144 lines, x 1000 measure. Setting travel point lines of graph, constellation wind factors, Setting ground lines of sequence, location system, all through settings of temperature reading. Directing ground lines of flux, flush over screen adaptations in process. Center core lines, high centers of circuit, the core centers of solar generation screens. Center communication lines of atom rotation lines of spin cycles and propellers over line. Directing core centers, line communicates in high lines of travel. Now, center communicates high centers, process communication lines of grounds, and plasma. Plasma equals line score, center location of water. Water equals lines of plasma over a setting. Center cross angles, inside rotation surface interactions. Okay? Very powerful stuff. Your time reactors in center operation and set lines, 2,400,000 lines, seconds per frame, seconds per mile, seconds over coordinates, seconds over calculus, over pi and set tractions. The solar ball goes around the system location of travel. Okay, it goes around the system in 3 lines of angles and travel communications. All right, around the setting. Process communication over line signal location system of travel. Okay? All right, bring it back home in sequence. Now we panel operate the system line core, the centers of weather panels. 4 signature lines of grounds of Schumann resonance, higher self. The avatar line sequence outline, screen adaptation of delta, alpha, and data. Data process lines at H, process lines at A, and position of B. C line tracks centers, avatar lines as A, set position lines in E. E equals D equals lines of 3 weather communication. Okay? Overriding sequence, panels operation screen. Okay? Center core platforms, 3 lines of angles. Inset position line, high core, center location of pyramid interaction. Okay? High centers, flux over lines of 3 angles and 4 set communication. Then we go through alpha, delta, theta, omega, zeta, zeta, gamma, rotation lines, radiation lines, thermal line connection, setting X-ray, Zulu, Foxtrot locations, setting travel lines of 3 measure and scale, and process communications. Constellation wind pass. Laser track centers in location grid into Skynet. There's your Skynet. All right. Now we go through red signals, high centers over cross, setting lines of 3 centers of angles. And then we cross line down over cross location and set position. But the line signals have to be outline, not inline traction, right? Then we come to scales and communicates the setting to Schumann resonance of flux. Okay, sets D factors over screen and headwards over line. Then we go into the blue scale, inside tracks, outside measure. Blue lines that indicates in system, sets coolants, lines and screen adaptations of setting. Okay, and then we set up the map, cloak and dagger. We do one through graph line. Point graphs, power graphs. Central graphs, communications, high center locations of power points. And a mapping sequence of 45 split. Process communication offline settings, inside rotation surface interactions. There's the map. Okay, then we open up the signal and location. Okay? Hola. There's the illumination graphs. There's the traffic inventories. Now you guys are in space now. You have to go through triangulation settings. Triangulation setting the surface. And line rotation of center operation. All right? Calculation lines, ground lines, and setting of travel. Okay? Remember, the foundation is already done through high set lines of sequence. All position location is dimensional door and set position. Walking centers, ground lines of setting, location system to all travels into your pyramid and travel communications. Offline and panels of communication setting high lines of surface. Setting travel point lines of graph and set position location measure and scale. High setting screens and line rotations of 45 flux lying an angle. Planetary lines, solar graph centers. We go through high center locations and travel. Set position lines of measure and scale. And then we go inline screen adaptations of green over lines, green over positions, and 3 communications. Change core centers, direct lines of grounds of surface. Measuring line rotations, archetypes come in, set position to 1 measure, 2 lines of traction, 3 lines of calculation. All right, set communication lines of settings and parameters over screen. Set core centers, intelligence information system. Okay? Center ops, inside lines, outline connection settings. We come into all levels. Red over sequence, planet lines, and Pluto. Ground lines, A-line tracks. So we have A-line process lines of one indication system all through flux over screen. Over crossing angles and line screen adaptations of 3 angles in travel and split lines of communication. So you guys are coming more into simulation lines. You're blocking screens now, guys. See? Face recognitions. Face recognition, everything you see in travel. Okay? Face recognitions, guys. Face recognitions. That's all we're seeing now. It's attractions. All right? Okay. All right, so simulation is already done in factors, setting screen adaptations of flux. Okay, hieroglyphics. Look at that, location lines, dark line, water line, screen adaptations of water containment screens, 3 lines of levels, and set position of space lines of anomaly. All right? Getting instruction lines of flights and line navigation screen. Center core system, lines of travels, indirect lines of links, and process communication. Okay, into line centers of high centers, wall sequence lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of settings, and colossal core centers and travels in point communication of setting. Indicate lines of triangulation, setting lines of points into wall center. Okay, high line sequence, panel screens, and 3 lines of communications. All through traction. Okay. So we have to work with inside now. It's that position of simulations. Okay. Work within the grounds of high lines of setting. Okay. Pluto. That's Pluto. Station mark. Direct lines and settings, process lines of 3 measure and scale. Okay. Orbiting through channels, XC1000 platitudes, outline rotations, cross angles, and split lines communication. And then we ground the centers and travel. Okay? Remember, guys, space is everywhere. Space can be anything in travel. It's all levels of space, right? And then you bring your planetary lines, set a position of 1 center, 1 operation sequence, 2 panels, communications, 8 tracks. An 8-track provision sets lines, calculation lines, outlink. Position lines of clocking, center location to a system. Okay? And then we clock down, setting lines of blue centers in set traction, setting volume and mass to each planetary lines in set traction. Okay? So bringing in the mass is knowing exactly how to get in line setting. And location to a system all through set track locations. Okay? You're building volume. Right, you're building scale, you're building mass. So I want you guys through the location setting. Then we go into green. Building block screens, adaptations of space lines of flux. Okay. Very powerful stuff. And your space lines of anomaly. Okay, there's the central set core system location is CERN. And the center operation lines has an orange sequence in center operation. Okay. Setting lines and high center location to a setting. Okay. All right. So we start off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 4 signal lines, 4 lines of setting, 8 lines of all lines of barometer, thermometer change, directings and blue signals. High signal lines of 1, high signal lines of 2, signal lines of 4, signal lines of 8 in travel. Okay. Red panels. High core centers the energy lines of core and set lines of units and set tracks center location system all through setting. Okay? Setting all line rotation service and rotation spins and set tractions. Okay, so understand the Earth is now in its own habitation zone. It's in its core center location coming to cyber force, into cybergenetics, cybermetrics, cyber meters, line conditions of scale. Its cocoon line screen adaptation in 3 months, 3 years in space through an anomaly. Going through the CERNs and rotation lines and 24 lines of flux. Okay, we change the angles in travels, in line rotation surface and travel communications. Okay. Okay, so there is in travel communications. All right. There it is in line communication traffic inventory. It's a lot of busy traffic inventory there. All right, and then we change the angles and point communication to the centers through its operation surface. Okay. Okay, then we change the colorations of patterns, illuminates the grounds, outline signals, inside rotations. We work with the outline to the inlines, clocking communications. All right. See that? All right. So know exactly how that's set up in line setting. All right. But you can't see it from here, can you? You have to bring it in to see the actual foundation that's already done through equation. Right? So it's already set up. All you have to understand is the outline centered to its mapping sequence through its coordinates. Know exactly what you're doing with your 12 lines of measure and scale through its mapping pi. Okay? To the center core, okay, of its earth and rotation setting of spectrum. And direct lines of light, direct lines of signal. Okay? Platforms over line, data ports, hangers over 6 over 8 over 12, and setting lines of communications. High grounds, lower grounds. Pi generation lines, flights over screen adaptations, a process line, signal location system, road graph communication. All right. Center core lines, center of signal, location system, author travel. Okay. So working with the inline center is knowing how to go through platforms, guys, to set up your structures of your buildings inside the earth through a hologram. Set tractions. You're creating a holographic city now. But the pixelation graphs has to understand location system all through settings of block screens. 3 lines that communicates lines of angles, instruction, and division location to a system. Different angles of a building. See? Flux up, flux down. Angle cross. See? Angle cross. See? Crossing line. So more Doctor Strange. So you see the platform here going this way, but it's inside outside. You see the structure of the building going down this way, but you also see it this way. That's a track inventory when you turn your earth into a pixelation to all levels of thermal to an X-ray. Okay? And then you come into this line setting. Look at this instructions. The dimensional doors. Okay? Remember, it's all 4 lines of all communications of flux of frequencies constantly changing the screen. See the structure of the building up, cross line, angle over cross location. Okay, inside rotation. Inside tractions. And inside provision. Okay? See, satellite come from here, from the grounds. There's a satellite, right? And you get signal locations and settings and track locations of shade. Colors, lines of patterns over blue, and set position. There we go in traction, right? White signals come in, lines of settings, probing and direct signal lines of grounds. High lines of signals, location system, all through travel. Okay? So your simulation foundation is already done, guys. You know, your whole levels, high signals, how you see your scales, how you see your rotation, surface, and tractions, all through setting. But it's amazing when you can turn your holographic earth into a structure of its own schematic as a primer, seen in all different angles of travel. Road graph here, structure building down. Okay? All right, so let's get into the clocking lines of 72. Let's get in that traction locations. 0 operation lines of 1 cycle, Earth 5. All right, so how this sets up is 0 lines, indicates lines of sun and position of the moon. Okay, avatar is going around. Okay, it's going around the setting. And set tractions all the way around. Okay, all right, panel lines, 3 signals out, 3 signals in. Okay, it's complicated stuff. In that position lines, 3 signals out. Okay, setting lines, 3 signals in. Okay, in and out at the same time, right? 3 signals out, 3 signals in. You see what I'm doing? And processing indicates the system changing the earth in perception. How you see the tractions. All right, so 3 signals out and set track locations, 3 signals in. All right, there's the 4. Okay, so we got 2 panels of our line, 3 centers, into position of 2 over lines of 5 scale. Okay, so that puts lines of point lines of 0, point lines of 5. Right, tractions. Now, directing line grounds, change the surface location system all through settings. Okay. Measure and scale and flux into flux capacitor. Time centers of compass and direct signals of grounds. See? Top rotation vessel, right? All right. Set up the ground lines of service, 3 grounds that communicate setting, 4 lines of flux, and panels of communication. Okay. And then we ground shift lines of anomaly and temperature readings, 170,000 line signals, and rotation lines of seconds over meters over scale. Process in that communicates the system all through flux into plasma screen. Okay, and then we online centers, echo, sonar, flux location. All right, so I get a spectrum here in light, spectrum here in grounds of surface and travel. Okay. Setting operation lines of panels and 3 lines of set correlation setting to travel. And then we flux down in sequence. Time measure and scale. Earth set correlations and height set and position of travel communications. Inside rotation lines and structure design line. All through traffic, all through inventory. Okay. 3 signals, lines, communication setting, height centers, rotation. So get in that positions, guys. You have to truly understand how to get into thermal to X-ray. Knowing exactly how to go through circulation 1 and circulation 4. Okay. Process signal, process grounds, process surface, process traction. Okay. Center core, center of the Earth, and rotation lines. Then we go to propellers and 4 sequence lines of panel. Okay. Then we process communication lines at grounds. The center core, center of 1 open line sequence, and 3 communication system, and a 4 traction. Okay. Setting communication platforms here, platforms in straight line communication. Okay. Directing core centers, we had 4 lines of signals, offline communication, inside lines, position of 2 track communications. And we send a core centers into electrical line grid. The operation signals comes in line screen adaptation. So we set offline communication setting, inline rotation, and travel. Then we come into on grids and rotation setting to its capsule and track communication. And then we have an I-line center. This is all done through the I-line set locations in the center I position, inside traction. All right. All right, so we color the line screen. Earth comes in center locations. All right. Now, Grassarian is connected to the walls of set position of the Earth line, which is the communication lines, Earth tones, and travel communications. Okay, and then it sets lines of the ground lines, is the Grothians. Grothian sets the pyramid line screen adaptations all levels. 300,000 lines above and 300,000 lines below. Okay, pyramid above and pyramid below. Center operation of center core center is the center core sys location setting. 144 line settings and travel. 72 lines earth lines and 1-3 graphs. And position 0-1 in tip of the scale and travel communications. So we set the grounds and high lines of service and travel communication in the I-line setting in center operation. Then we come into the water containment setting, into subterranean, into all water sequence. Now, this outlines the provision, earth line calculations, spectral lights, communication lines and cataracts, into floaters of communication, directing ground lines and set the correlation system of the earth and travel. Okay, there's your earth. 45 flux lines of anomaly and set traction locations. All right. Direct lines and set position of 45 line split lines of anomaly and center core line communications. I-line centers I sequence inside rotation to its mapping position lines of panel. Its operation sync locations. Okay. Okay, so it's known exactly how to set this up, the earth line. Okay, so now we change centers. We change the red over screen over outline and in set position. And then we go inline, which is inner circuit location setting to travel. And then we cloak and dagger. Remember, it's always calculate, modify, changing the mapping centers in a 4-line communication system all through setting. Right? That is Elter Skelter. It's the sketch that offlines this communication creates this new map. Copy and paste it in line position of box frames. Okay, then you come into the map. Okay, there's the map in sequence. There's the map and panel. There's the map and track location to system all through travel. All through triangulation flux. See? It's confusing, right? Because you can see the light station shadows, you see the pyramid, but you see the pyramid at different angles. You see it in white, blue, and black. And you got a ground lines of setting, right? Change direct signal location of setting location of grounds. Set 45 line communication, offline rotation, service, and travel. Okay? Setting communication angles, and line screen adaptation and attraction. Okay? So, getting that communications, know exactly how to sequence that in traffic inventories and for communications. All right, directing lines into your position location, to your mountains. There's your mountain. Okay, mountain sequence lines, travel point lines of graphs, and blue flames and communication. And center core lines and white lines, signal locations of strips, lines of anomaly. High core centers and direct location lines into high core center location of travel. Okay, so you have to work with the inside line connections now, guys. Okay, inside everything. Okay, so your imagination is all line centers and that communication system all through traction. Okay. All right, so once we get into the clocking line grounds, we go through high centers. Now you have to understand the 24 lines of clocking, 48 lines in settings, 72 in computer, and 144 crystal grid. All right, 24 3 lines of flux over lines of anomaly, and a 4-track location lines of tether. All right, sets communication high grounds, high lines of several location settings, solar system. All right. Mercury, Jupiter, coordinates, lines of screen adaptations of Neptune, crossing angles in Jupiter, 2 waving panels and screen. Okay. So we get a ground surface and 3 lines of settings of 4 scales. Set position, cross angles, set position, cross divisions, and box frame. All right. Door sequence, high center lines of travel, direct lines of length. Center core lines of split, lines of 3 lines of anomaly, and set tractions. High signals, location and ground lines of settings. Inhibitors over line and graph communications. 45 angles in seconds, minutes, and hours of travel. Okay? Inside rotation. Intelligent. See the eyes? There's the eyes. There's the face. There's the structure. There's the design. You see the arms? Okay. Face right there. All right. All right. Always a face in everything you get in schematics of drawing, guys. You have to really get into that traction locations. All right. So as it's set up in its graph, it's on through a 72 computer line, directing say location of grounds. So we send the core system. We change the platforms. It changes the angle points of seconds, minutes, and hours in frame. Okay. Kaleidoscope lines, kilo mic, screen adaptation. Setting core lines of track centers, offline, inline rotation line cycles, and 3 communication setting and travel. Okay, and then we outline the signal location of patterns. So we're highlighting the setting. Bringing what we want to bring out. Snowy graph, coloration graph, communication graph, center graph, pixelation graph, holograph graph, pixelation graph, power over pi over graph, power over measure over scale graph, anything that communication. All right, and then we color it. Color it highlights the signals over red, kaleidoscopes over 3 over track correlation. Okay, bring it out through equation, setting lines of travel. Okay, so you're just highlighting your mapping sequence now. All right, knowing what's already done through foundations. Ground lines of settings, Pluto lines, offline communications in green. Any position of your planets can be any color because you're make-believing in process communications. All right, signal lines, center core system, all through tractions, right? Green over lines over blue, blue over red. A sequence, sending lines of position of charge, inline, outline, rotation, service, and travel. Okay? All through schematics, inside rotation. Very complicated stuff, but it's all set location, setting, and travel. Okay? But you've got to get used to going inside rotation, inside directions. Okay? All through measure, all through scale. All right? So I'm showing you the schematics, how you set this up. And it's all connected to the earth line, which is inside rotation, outside traction, sorry. Set position inside and travel. Set positions outside and expansion of travel. Okay? All right, so we got flux over 3, flux over 6, flux over 9, and flux over 12. Okay, and then we change the circuit lines of settings. And we set point lines of graph into hangers, into dockings. 6 lines of measure, 3 panels, locations of pi, set position 2 panels, and travel communications. All right, then we on the online switch, inside rotation of center. Okay, setting communicates the system all through travels. Let's get a direct line link and set communication. All right. So working with the outline is the inline rotation lines of travel. Okay. How you direct your links is process of communications. Inline centers, and rotation lines of settings, kaleidoscope mic, kilo fox. You see it? All right. Then we set lines, high center location, X8000 to the I sequence and set direction. Okay, and then we change the core centers lines of time into another teleportation vessel. It's all in the center core system of flux over line and lines of communications and settings and 4 sequence lines of panel, all inside the online. So we set a browser adapter over screen, high centers of 2 panels, and traffic communication setting, and torque fields and traffic communications. Ground lines of setting, high lines of server location system, off the calculations. Okay, inside rotation. Okay. Now you can see 2 intelligence there. One looking this way, one looking that way. Always intelligence in everything that you do. All right, so we got the center lines and the 45 communication lines of angles. All right, and then we get set position, back in frame, back in setting, back in travel. Okay? So I'm showing you exactly how your Earth forms its own system now in metrics, meters, and scales through its own geometric, geological, and geographical system. The foundation of the Earth is the foundation of everything in setting, but it's the mind conceptual setting where the body has to come into its network of its own frame position of its reality where it is in real time, sending all that communication system all through travel. So you can do a center core lines of this, you can do a center core lines of this, you can do a center core lines of this in location to your Earth, all right? And you can do a center core lines of this, and you can do center core lines of this and travel. Okay, so you're constantly changing your Earth. That's what you're doing. That's what your Earth is doing in travel, changing its Earth setting. Process lines equal, line core centers off position, inside rotation. Okay, see the Earth is coming in its own plasma line, but it has to have its invisible line, it has to have its imaginary line, so it can morph into its settings, where the body has to understand its network, where it's going in setting to a 7-day window. Okay, so we had a clocking line screen. Let's get in 4 divots of transition. 4 settings, right? And then we get 4 settings again, and we get 4 settings again, and it's on your watch, right? That sets signals and location system. So 4, 8, 12, and 16 lines of measure and scale, all right? And we got dilations of center of the sun and position of the moon. Okay, the avatar is traveling through pi of 3 centers of travel, and is correlating through divot points of travel communication, inside and outside through pi. Clocking out lines, set lines, core centers, divots over screen, outline, set position, inline tractions of 3 measure and scale. All right, so it's a digital analog, and that's what it is, a position. Digital analog is a clocking number of 0 into, let's get an hours lines of frame, minutes in frame, and seconds over hour. Okay, and then we clock the systems through pi, 1/3 ground. Okay, then we change the ground lines of server location system all through track and measure and scale. Then we set lines of flux over 4 centers, inside rotations. So communication lines of flux over screen. Okay, and inside again. Okay, and inside again. And travel communications. All right. So, understanding inner force, outer force lines of sequence location the Earth. Earth's surface lines are direct signals to propeller of a solar screen adaptation to a system all through process. Directing lines and compass over line, compass over grounds, and surface track locations. Set a calculate, modify, center operation lines of sequence locates to a system. Okay? So planetary surface of Jupiter, inside rotations, all levels of Neptune's outside. Set core lines of Mercury is outside, in set position all levels, setting travel point lines of graph and clocking screen. Direct signal location of grounds. Right? So now you have to understand how to see your Earth inside and outside through thermal, through X-ray. What's going on in set track locations, in set position. Okay, through the Earth. So the Earth is changing the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres of time. The Earth itself is its own time machine, clocking centers of 3 centers in position of its pyramid. Okay, wall sequence lines of grounds, flux over lines, structure the building. There's the building inside the Earth. Right there, boom. So you're making that as you go. Setting sequence, setting travels, point lines of graph, center core system. Split lines of anomaly in a 4-line calculus and setting of 3 lines of angles. 4 lines of angles of a structure of a building. All different angles inside the eye line. Structure line division in location system, all 3 platforms, and 3 grounds of surface and travel. Okay? All right. Does everybody understand what's going on in travel communications? The Earth itself is forming it back into itself, its original imprint, back to its holographic line, set location of systems. So once we understand anything you understand, make and believe is your reality is existing all at once, is changing and morphing into everything in set position that you can measure and scale. But you have to understand the ground lines of 1 and process lines of 2. Kaleidoscope sonar, 3 signals in ground lines of surface outline rotation setting. Cross line, angle line. Process line signals over cross in cross location. Then you go flux over screen and direct signals of angles into all set location, your satellite and travel. Okay? Setting ground lines of server location system and calculation. All right? Solar sail. Solar wind. Solar spectrum. Solar division. Solar locations. High channeling the waves, the screen adaptations of flux, inside rotation. We've got to get inside the simulation grounds now, guys, in your traffic inventories. How to travel through it. How to travel through space lines of anomaly. And set position to its door frames and travel. Okay? Because the simulation, the foundation is already done through equation. Okay? All right, so out structure lines as high course centers lines of travel. All right, so the 144 high lines of service, as long as you understand the circulation rotations, you're good to go. All right? But it's process and position how you go through the angles of point lines of graph and 3 center lines of surface. Inside rotation. Inside rotation. Inside rotation. Okay? And then you get in positions, you can use the platforms of eye lines of sequence. Okay? In window frames and track communications and setting up dimensional doors. Then you get in your platforms of track communications. Okay? And then you get in your door direction timelines and set position of flat lines of surface. Okay? And then you get into the wall line grounds, split communication lines, graphic communication lines of grounds, and structure line division. Okay? And then you go into ceilings of communication lines of set position of the Earth. Right? Keyboard, key phrasing, key locks. Earth habitation lines of 1 over purple over screen and outline signal and location. Blue plasma line inside track correlation setting 3 lines of communication. And red signals inside rotation centers and calculation setting of Fibonacci. Out center, out division, out locations. Coming out through equations inside, rotating line in this way, this way, this way. Back in equation, set interactions. All surface, location system, all through setting. Okay? So it's more fun we get into clockings and schematics of our line. Know exactly what's going on with your travels. But you've got to understand the center core system lines of setting. All right, metric core centers, that's going to have flat surface lines of 1. Okay? Okay, so gravity here and setting. Okay. Okay, so that position lines the high centers. Platforms over here in traction. Okay. Center core system. We're right here now. Okay, so we have the Frost Bridge, we have the Rainbow Bridge, and we have the Golden Bridge. Okay, 3 angles and point lines of graph. Insecure line defense. Okay, and then we go through the walking surface of 1, 2, and 3 centers of travel. Okay, and then we online centers location setting to its set position of its satellite, setting offline signals, location grounds lines of server location system all through travel. Your satellite sets at the signals, planet 2 lines of 12 lines of cell locations of planet 1, planet 2, planet 4, planet 6, planet 8, and planet 12. That's all you're using in seconds, minutes, and hours. Right? So you don't have to use all 12 planets, guys. You can use as many as you want, but you have to send your 12 inventories. How it comes into 12 traffic signals location system all through inventory communication setting and track location. All 3 constellations and setting. Okay? All right. Setting sequence of panels is known exactly how to do ground line center location setting at 0, 1. Okay, so setting lines position of 0, 1 tractions. Let's get in line direct signals at dilation. Okay, 0 line, go inside. And setting lines and set correlations of flux over 3. Now you have the 3 line signals equals lines of 4, 7 lines of 7 into 144. Equals lines into space, into time, measure, and scale. Okay? 0, 1 flux is down, 1 line offline signal. Okay? Then we process the line position of satellite and travel through your pyramid. Boom. So ground line settings, hieroglyphics, and rotation, service, and travel. There's your pyramid and set position. All right? Cosmic flame, serpent flame, cosmic fire, in connection settings to travel communications. Kaleidoscope lines of 1, sonar, echo, Zulu, Fox lines thermal. Ground lines of high lines of server location system, all through platforms and set tractions. Okay. Waving panel. High signal lines of clock lines of 0 over 1, 1 over 0. 0 over 1, 0 over 1, 1 over 0 in platform. So going through a clocking of 0 1s, guys, is an inventory lines and measure. Now you have to understand the core centers of seconds, minutes, and hours in a clocking through a foundation of solar streams. Think of a river that basically has a continuous flow. But think of the flow as plasma of a holographic ground that's surfacing through its 0s and 1s in travel. And it has in that lines of communication lines of space. Space is here. So the 0s and 1s from the inventory lines, the ground lines of service, comes in set position, location, and measure. So the 0 1s comes in the flux, they see the space, and they set position here in traction. Okay? Complicated stuff, guys, for 0 1 clocking. All right? But that's how it's set up in travel for 0 and 1. Okay? Very complicated stuff. Very complicated stuff, guys. Very complicated. But it's going to be a lot of fun because you have to understand how to get in your traffic inventories, how to get into all levels, out with the old, in with the new cycles, new ground lines. So 0, 1 has a provision lines of cycles and 3 lines of communication lines of scale. All right, center core lines of 3 lines of measure, ground lines of 1, 2, platforms of 3, 6 lines of measure. Okay, there's a ground. Okay, set position location. All right. All right. Set position location of setting. Structure of a building. Right here. Right? And then we cross the angles, we change the 0s and 1s that structured is to the location setting of its set lines. It comes now a building of 0, 1 and travel in set track location. There's the building through 0 and 1 inside the earth. All right, there's the other side of the building. Okay? 2 sides of the building and 3 setting. All right, and then we offline a 45 split. Sending communication lines, change direct signal location setting and the structure of the building. Okay? Off communication setting lines of service track location. Okay? But this is what you can do with 0, 1 clocking. Okay, very complicated stuff. But it's a lot of fun once you understand how to do it through Skynet. All right? Working inside traffic inventories, location setting to your stargates. All right, stargates, guys. Open the signals, open the panel. Okay. All right. But I'm just showing you exactly what you do through zeros and ones through traffic inventory. Okay, as a constant continuous flow. If you get a box screen and a center core lines of communication, it has an up line, as a panel line, as a down sequence, and it has a cross line angle. Okay, that's your pyramid. Okay, so you work within lines, flux over screen. Okay, but you got a line stating location centers of travel. Each line indicate has to be in that line that all communicates to a system with surface. So you work with a box frame inside rotation, inside directions, outside division, and 4 box frames. Travel point lines of graph, inside calculation. Okay. So it's amazing when you get that line center location to a system all through directions. So now you understand the 0 and 1. Now you understand the 72, and now you understand the 144. So making believe is basically everything that's already done through the equation. So you're just looking at the foundation that's already done, right? Seeing what you're getting in position of the body, where the networks needs to be in lines of 7 windows into a 30 window frame, right? Humanity in 3 signals, 4 grounds of settings and settings. So it's 6 platforms, and line communication settings of 4 tractions into 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, and set lines of 12, set lines of 13, 14, 15, 16 lines of settings, lines of set 18, 19, 20 line rotation, and travel communications. Working inside and out line, in circuits over line, in motherboards, and rotation, service, and travel. Okay, so this humanity is the operatives and units. Okay, so working with lines and settings of 3 lines of 4 is a 7-line signal. That process communication setting when you come to levels of inhibitors. Setting lines of 24 lines of grounds, 20 lines of settings, plus line equals lines of setting, question. Ozone, line condition setting, process lines, Y screen adaptations into clocking centers. 4 lines of signals to 2 lines of screen adaptations, 4 signal location grounds, center core centered in your pyramid and travel. Okay, everything's inside your pyramid, right? Your body, always inside. You never keep anything outside. So even if you think you're outside, you're inside, inside, outside. But what you have to understand the clocking system, clocking inside, clocking outside. Okay, anything out that line, okay, you're in other inhabitation zones that don't exist yet. It's void of space. It's not a time scale. It's not a time measure. It's in real time, but it's not for you to process yet until you understand how to use your windows in your body frame of your realities existing all at once. Clocking centers of kaleidoscope, screen adaptations of flux. Over cross locations of dimension line, high core center locations of flux. High core centers line communication lines are high communications of flux. Projections over 1, projections over 2, projections over 3, and scale communication. Okay? All through traction, all through setting. Okay? So now you have to understand the inline, outline. It's no difference how you're looking at a box and you're outside looking in. Okay? This is you going in, right? This is you looking out. Okay? So once you get that in position, then you go outline. Okay? Outline circuit, outline rounds, outline space. Creating lines of anomaly. Space line itself is just creating. Out. Creating new, out, 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 expanding, 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 exploring, exploring, evolving, 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 evolving. That's all it's doing, right? Inside, outside. There it is. There's the structure. There's the position of box frame, right? So you see the grounds, the panels, and the ceiling. Okay? That's all you're creating. But you have to understand the inner circuit to understand the outer circuit. Okay? Anything outline center, okay, you're in the 12 clocking system. Okay? You don't want to be there. You want to be in your habitations of 6, in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, and 6 out. But it's inside the frame. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So transits over line, divots over screen. Remember the transits, the dots? Well, that's what it is on a scanner. I'm just showing exactly how this is all set up to a mapping sequence. So we understand what it is, how you see, Earths that come into habitation zones, where it has a habitation, where you can actually live on it and set tractions. But it's all transits at divots. Okay, so it's like looking at a scanner on a piece of paper, knowing exactly what's on and what's offline correlation setting in real time. Divots are the transitions of transaction settings. That's all it is. And then you bring it in. Okay, but they don't know that, right? You don't know to do that and set tractions. Your cells. Your cells create bridges. See the bridges? Lines, molecule design line, 3 lines of flux over line, molecules, of course, location setting, atom line rotations, protons, electrons, neutrons, high center correlation system, all inside your hand line. Swimming in line rotation. Inside traction. Okay? Inside traction. Okay? Change communication lines of grounds. Now the position of transistors over lines. Resistors. There's a resistor. You see a resistor, what has changed the set core center line connection to your DNA? See? What does that do? Disrupts everything here, right? In setting, in frequency of panel. Okay? So, now you understand what the cells do. They create the bridging, right? Molecules, structure line, division, location lines, high core centers of transitions over lines, and communication lines of proxy. Okay? Okay, so you got protons, I'll get a red signal here, flux over 3. Okay, so now you're bringing the high lines of signals now and set tractions. All right, changes the bridging and communication system all through travel, right? Change process lines, road graph screens, bring in green is combustion over line into compensatories, compartment screen adaptation. Okay? Off communication lines and high set correlations to setting to travel. Okay? In set tractions, all through setting. Okay? So, it comes in all line center location system, right? Knowing exactly what's coming in inside location in your system off the calculations. Inside of you, your thermal and your x-rays. Know exactly how to see your cells, your molecules, the atoms, your protons, electrons, neutrons, what's going on through its traffic and its own inventory set locations. But you have to understand why this is all set up in your Earth inside of you. Your transits over divots. The process communication setting is nothing but, you guessed it, your DNA. Okay. So we cross the angles and highways and screen in 3 lines of center. 4 scales, 3 communications. Right? Off position, inside traction. All right? There's your pyramid, inside traction. Okay? So you're constantly working on your DNA lines. Each cell has a particle line center, outlines of signals. Okay, sets the satellites and setting, rotation system and travel. Comes in skyline grid. Okay? Particle line is streamlines, outlines the line center location of system all through traction. Okay? So it's like birds that fly in a V. You know, there's always a leader in a flock in setting and travel. Okay? So your process and your position locations comes in this setting and travel communications. Okay? Now, anything red line is high core centers. Flux over 1, flux over 2, flux over 3. Okay, outline signals. Set core center location setting into all of the blue. Blue lines outlines process 1, process 2, over lines of setting and travel. Okay, so that's plasma interference. 3 atom rotation lines of flux over screen. Line signal lines of travel, guys. You have the line its map. High signals lines of 1 over 2, 3 lines of signals. So all you're doing through your DNA is creating structure of vision. You're creating a picture frame all through cells, molecules, and protons. They are the ones that set the schematics. Okay, so I just want you to truly understand how this all sets up You're creating a structure of division lines, division line cortex of your thoughts, action, emotions. That's what the atoms and molecules and protons do, but they only do that when you perceive conscious in the location of a system. All through traction, inside line connections. Okay? Very powerful stuff in travel. There you go. There's the map. Okay, so DNA opens up the map in seconds, minutes, and hours, line communication and bridging through the cells. Cells comes in, line cell location, line screen adaptation of traffic inventory. Remember, this is all inside location of your system. Okay? So we have to send through our core centers, line communication, sending, and travel. All right? So we're going to 3 lines of sending, 4 lines of 5. Let's get into purple over screen. 2 tractions, 3 line signal location, sending, and travel. Okay? Offline, center location, system, and travel. Okay, red signals in high signal location setting, instructions to set location, 3 lines of measure, and transistors over resistors over screen. 5 scales, 5 position locations, inside rotation. Okay, inside line conditions. All right, change the vertical signal location system all through travel. Mapping sequence through pi. Okay, so you have to truly understand what your cells do inside rotation, inside your traction. What are they doing? Creating the vision, creating the cortex, creating your travels, creating your schematics and set tractions, guys. They do everything inside your system. To create the simulation of foundation. But now you understand why it's so important, what's going on in setting. All through simulation, right? Because they have their own simulation systems all through the bridgings. Right? And molecule design lines, you can bring in flux line screens, blue over screen. But you got to be very careful that you don't override the setting through combustion set location. Right? As soon as you bring in the red outlines the location of receivers and travel. Okay? But you have to know what goes on with your 12 DNA and divots and travel communications. Okay? Amazing we see that in transitions to your DNAs inside traction. All right? So that gives you exactly what goes on inside you through your pyramid. All right, so we set the grounds, highlights the sequence, 3 panels, and then we cross over 3 signals, and we cross over again, another 3 signal locations sending a travel. Change the traffic inventories into high line screen adaptations of 3 travel communications. Bridging lines of 1 over 2 over 3 of sequence. Scales communication meters, we bring in the orange lines, which is your creative cycles. Okay, this is your creative system location, your settings. And basically blue, we bring in the water containment screen. 3 angles of point communications. Remember, this is all inside your system happening right now. Okay, so you go through 12 DNA. I mean, you can go with the lines of pink. Pink resist location, the bypass to your heart. Pink comes in, overrides the signals. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Bigger and bigger and bigger to your endorphins. Offline condition setting to travel. Okay? So the compartment line same location system travels into external lines of grounds and set lines of high lines of service. Sending communication line high centers and location system all through travel. Okay? A lot of traffic, a lot of inventory. All through your cells in travel communications. Okay? Woo! Boy, you guys are going to definitely need a Q&A after this in set position. All right. So I'm showing you so many different levels how you get lines of transits over line, but what you're doing is you're expanding out now. So it's basically when you get in position locations, you understand the in and out, out and in, but what you understand is just the expanding in set position because the in is already done. The out is already done, right? But you have to understand how to go out and in and out. And once you do that, you're creating the position of the ceiling, the panels, and the grounds. Okay? And then you just expand out and travel. Okay? You expand out and travel. You're expanding your systems. That's all it is. Okay? Clocking centers at 24, 48, 72, 140 bar. It doesn't matter. What matters, do you know what you're doing in your body lines of framing? If your traffic inventory is the 3 lines, there's the primer. right? Perimeter here, perimeter here, perimeter here, perimeter here, perimeter here, perimeter here, perimeter here. There's a perimeter right there. But it's all done through your system locations to your pyramids. Your body's just a pyramid, nothing else, nothing more. Flux over screen. Inhibitors over 3. So that's 3 scales, 4 centers, 5 set track location. Pi generation lines of 3 centers, in lines of link, and communication lines of panel. Okay? 5 line centers of Jupiter, 5 line centers, lines of Mercury, and 5 line center locations of Earth, and rotations flux over screen adaptation. Okay? Center core centers, lines of travel communication. Okay? So you just have to constantly know what you're doing and position your mapping sequence. Right? Panels operation signals, 1/3 grounds, 1/6 over line, half pipe. 2/3 of a half pipe. So that's 2/3 of grounds, over line, centers, over cross, location, offline, 1 signal, half line ground communication and travel. Offline centers, ground lines that serve location system all through travels in the I-line sequence. Okay, and line centers and inhibitors over screen and adaptations of flux. Okay? Your traffic inventory is no longer in mass. It's in plasma now. So we have to understand how to travel through it at a higher frequency and set tractions. All through measure, all through scale. Okay? Inside the I-line. Okay? Travel this way, high course centers, downshift lines anomaly, wormholes in all directions all at once. All around the particle acceleration of time center and sequence, and panel operation centers and location setting of echo sonar chamber. Okay? Inside rotation. Okay? So that's what you have to come into. Okay, ground lines of several locations from this. Start over that. Humanities in this now. And the human units is in this, coming into plasma. So your highways are like this now. More liquid formations, your H2Os are lines of neutralized and lines of electrolytes. That's your highway. Okay, so straight lines, grids, mass over equations. So your connection system is a lot more tricky now because it's moving very faster. Okay, it's electrolytes, electrical panels, electrical line, communication highways, networks, and correlation setting and travel. Okay, very complicated stuff from this to this. Okay. Your ventricle valves, the I-line screens has line screens, right? Those are line locations that red adapters. See the line signals? Right here in core center location, the I-line, inside rotation, right? So those are window red graphs in communication setting in high center locations. The flux over line browser adapters left, right on lines, and left over screen adaptations, flux over line rotations, center communication lines of angles, high core centers, transits over 1, transits over 3, Earth line rotation center in the circuit. Rotation lines of Earth, rotation lines of space. I-line centers are right, left line communication direct and redirect. Panel communication line to pyramid, cross line calculation angles, line conditions inside, outside lines of angle correlation setting, downshift lines anomaly, high course centers. Templates, tablets, and travel. 3 graphs, screen and adaptation lines, 4 lines of communication system, all the calculation lines, inhibitors over screen, complacements over line, equalays, course center location of travel, cerebrum cortex lines, calculation lines, the hydrate cell location system, inhibitors over line, screen adaptations, flux over line, capacitor over setting. So it's all set up in traction. All through set calculation, your highways and networks. Okay. All right, so I'm giving you a lot now. So you have to truly inside rotations, understand your DNA, how it works inside rotation, inside tractions. Okay? Inside of you. All right? That's it. All right, we're going to be in the Coliseum level C. Coliseum level C. Copy that, Unison. This is Alpha Bravo. Over and out. See you guys in 5.